we've got our one platoon in the trench line shooting at the last one. The other platoon's kind of sneaking up this wadi. And all of a sudden, like right in between these two units, massive like explosion from a round of mortars. So I'm on the top of this hill, and I call my company commander. I'm like, "Yo, you gotta cease fire. Like, I think we just killed Marines. I think somebody's dead."
Hey friends, welcome to Rugged. Young adulting is tough, and I'm here to show you how to make it easy. You'll learn mindset strategies to harness your thoughts and emotions in ways that help you achieve your goals. I'm your host, Trey Tucker, so let's dive right in. Mac Caldwell went to the Air Force Academy where he was wing commander over 4,000 other cadets. Then he went to the Naval Academy. Then he became a Marine and trained other Marines. He's got some amazing stories, and he'll tell us what the military taught him about things like making decisions, handling criticism, pushing through when things don't go according to plan, and other leadership and life tips. Think you're going to get a lot out of this? Let's dive right in.
And dude, I thought of this one story from my time in the Marines. So I was a company executive officer at the time in the infantry. So that meant I was like the second in charge for, I think at this time we had about 200 Marines in our company and supporting our company. And we were doing this training exercise in the desert in 29 Palms, California, which is like right across the street basically from Joshua Tree National Park. So if you ever go to Joshua Tree, you can look across the street and like see the bombs exploding and all that. It's pretty cool.
Nice.
29 Palms is like, it's an awesome spot. But we were doing this big, complicated training range with live ammunition, very complex. We've got, 180 maneuvering Marines and then 20 Marines that are like in a supporting position shooting machine guns and mortars. And our objective for the day, so my boss, who was the commander, had to lead all 180 of our Marines through, clearing these kind of pretend enemy that were in these actual physical trench lines on this, kind of in this canyon. Super dynamic. Like we had this mine clearing device. Somebody carries 90 pounds of C4 in a backpack, lays it down on the ground, it blows a giant hole through all this concertina wire. Really fun to watch.
Yeah.
And then we're like launching mortars and, Marines are moving around with machine guns. And as all this dynamic stuff is happening, my company commander's down in the thick of it. He's instructed me as his number two to kind of go be his eyes in the sky, watch from above, and help him understand like where to move the pieces on the chessboard based on, what the exercise is telling us, like what they're saying. Hey, the enemy's over here now. Now you see him running away, whatever.
Right.
There are so many transitions that have to take place in an attack. Like, first platoon takes this objective. Now we transition to second platoon taking the next objective, and they have to pass first platoon. And that's dynamic and scary and complicated. And we're shooting live ammunition. There's a lot of just like little tiny transitions that if they're not done well, people get hurt, right? So I'm conducting, if you will, sort of at the top, watching all this stuff happen. And we had planned for first platoon, there were a couple trench lines, and the last trench line was the hardest to get. But if you put a platoon in sort of about 200 meters away in an opposing trench line shooting at it, you could sneak another platoon up this little wadi, which is a word meaning basically like a dried up river. So you could sneak a platoon up this wadi and they could kind of come over the top and get into that last trench line. That was our plan. So we're at the point where, mortars had been pounding this spot, and then the mortars were going to shift over to the last trench. Do you know what a mortar is?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But go ahead and define it.
It's basically like a small bomb that you shoot from a tube on the ground. It lobs up and over your head and lands on bad guy's head. And, the effective casualty radius for what we were shooting was a 50-meter radius. So half a football field, basically, of space where it would hurt you. Mm-hmm. We've told our mortars to, like, shift over to that last target. And we've got our one platoon in the trench line shooting at the last one. The other platoon's kind of sneaking up this wadi. And all of a sudden, like, right in between these two units, massive, like, explosion from a round of mortars. And this is not a lot of space. Like, they're literally, as I'm looking at this all happen, they're exploding on top of the heads of our guys. And this is a training exercise. So I'm on the top of this hill, and I call my company commander. I'm like, yo, you gotta cease fire. Like, I think we just killed Marines. I think somebody's dead.
Wow.
And I like one of my two best friends in the company are the platoon commanders for these two maneuver units, right? So my immediate thought is like, I need to get down there, and I'm probably not going to be the guy doing combat casualty care, but I need to go direct this operation because I don't know who's dead and who's not. I run down there, and I'm still hearing machine guns. I'm still hearing like the exercise is clearly still going on. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's not as bad as I think. Otherwise, they would have stopped everything. When I get down to my buddy Kendrick's platoon, Kendrick was a football player at the Naval Academy, stud, just like awesome guy. And I thought he was going to be dead. Kendrick is like up on the trench line, directing his machine gun fire at this last trench with this giant hunk of like bloody gauze tucked under the chin strap of his helmet, just sopping and dripping blood like all over his uniform. And this is and this dude, I love Marines. Kendrick is like a Marines Marine, but he's up there just like lobbing, nastiness at this pretend enemy, doing his job. No one died. No, he was the only one who was like injured in this whole event, where realistically, if the weapon had done what it was supposed to do, it would have killed a ton of us. And it was terrifying for me when we obviously did like a thorough after action to figure out what the heck happened during this transition. And what happened is like one of the, these 19-year-old Marines shooting these mortars, they like put the wrong data into their system and they didn't shift the mortar the way that they thought they did. So they were shooting old target data, even though they thought they were shooting the new target data. And it's just like one tiny mistake like that could have killed a lot of people. And I thought it was such a good analogy for how life is. It can feel sometimes like when you're in that period of transition, one little tiny lapse of attention or like not being deliberate in the right ways can totally foil whatever you're trying to do. And at the same time, a little dash of grace can kind of undo whatever damage that could be done from that failed transition.
Yeah, because you said the weapon did not do what it was actually intended to do.
The round went off.
Right.
But for whatever, I think it was just like the specific micro terrain where the round landed is like Kendrick happened. He was up on the top of this berm, like looking at the enemy, directing machine gun fire. So he happened to be like his head was exposed above the berm. So when the round exploded, like his head is what was exposed. And his Marines were a little bit down under fire or under cover. So, I mean, yeah, it was a grace of God kind of moment, but it could have derailed everything. And in a training incident, like killed Marines, which is kind of the reality of training in the military. People die. But yeah, I think transitions in life are just the golden opportunity for mistakes. If you don't have your guard up, if you're not thinking carefully about what direction you're going and how you need to coordinate your support system to get you to that next objective, life will creep up on you and catch you in the worst way. Yeah.
How do you get to that point where, at least as best you can be, you're ready for a transition? Are there steps? Were there other experiences?
Yeah. So I guess two things that I think I would say there. One is you have to be willing to step into a transition to make it successful. Like we would have never been able to attack that third trench line if Kendrick didn't get his platoon up into the second one and start shooting at it. So you have to take action. Like if you're facing a moment of transition, whether it's like going to college, getting a job, getting married, moving, these may seem like sort of benign things, but they're big transitions in life. You have to take the step. Like, don't shy away from that challenge. You have to step into it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I think you need to understand what your supporting fires are, if you will. Like,
say more about that.
So in this scenario, it was like we failed to understand that the people supporting us didn't understand where we were and how we needed their help. So they thought they were being helpful shooting that round of mortars when really they were like kind of destroying us. And I think if you're in that period of transition, you're you need to like carefully and deliberately organize your support system to support you, for the people that are there to support you, in a way that they understand like where the objective is, how you intend to get there, and then they can find a way to support you and, you know, cross-reference that and like, hey, is this actually helpful? Is this going to be beneficial to you? Do you want me to make this networking connection for you? Like, I've got a buddy who lives in that college town. Would you like to meet up with, you know, with him for lunch? Like those little sort of actions are, I think, the things you can do to prepare yourself for a transition is get your team ready. And you may not have a team. Like if you're someone who's, and I've done this in life too, where you step into a new venture and you don't really feel like you've got that much backing.
Yeah.
Step one is you got to step. You got to go into it. Step two is you build that network yourself. And it's hard. I don't know. I don't think I've done it perfectly in life, but when you have a period of transition, if you can identify, I'm transitioning here, I need to coordinate a support system, it's easier to go find those people who can help you, you know?
Yeah. Two things come to mind when you talk about those two steps. Take the step and build your team. Just from a brain standpoint alone, our brain is always going to push us to what's familiar, and it sees anything that's not familiar as dangerous. Not that it knows actual physical danger is happening, but just it thinks that since there are unknown elements to whatever this new transition is going to be, that it's automatically unsafe, and so therefore it's going to try to hold us back from taking that step.
Yeah.
So any advice on how to actually push through what our brain is telling us to just hold back and stay conservative?
I think it helps a lot to make those kind of changes in groups where possible. Human beings are really susceptible to peer pressure. And if all of my peers are going to do this uncomfortable thing at the same time as me, sure, I guess I'll do it too. I don't want to be different from everybody else.
Right.
Like, so I went to the Air Force Academy for college. Like night and day lifestyle difference from, you know, 1 week I was running the state track meet in Murfreesboro with long hair down to my shoulders. And a week later, I'm like getting yelled at and I'm only allowed to say 7 phrases, right? Like a pretty radical life change. But I did it with 23 other people in my immediate proximity who were doing the exact same thing. And that makes it a lot more bearable. Like to just, when the lights go out at night, to have somebody you can look at and make eye contact and be like, does this suck for you too? It does. Okay. All right. We'll make it. And I think it helps to have someone who you can encourage if they're going through a challenge. So like if I was going off to college again and found myself there were times during basic training at the Air Force Academy where I was like, dude, I want to go home. I don't know about this. Maybe I was wrong about this, you know, wanting to join the military thing. Yeah. But I had a support system of people who I had just met who were going through this experience with me who could come alongside and say, hey, man, you're fine. Like, ooh, that's ominous. There's thunder in the background if you can't hear. Of people who could come alongside and say, like, keep going. You know, we're all doing it. Right. If we're surviving, you can too. Yeah. And I think at other junctures of transition in life that have been particularly challenging for me, having a network, a brotherhood, a support system of people who I can identify are right there with me, who can be like, no, it's okay. Step in. Just go for it. Like, I'm right here watching you. I remember going through like a tough time in a relationship. When I graduated from college, I had been dating this girl, and it did not end the way I wanted it to. It ended abruptly, and it was really sad, and I was really heartbroken. And I had a network of men who I reached out to me and said, hey, you're going through something tough right now, but I'm here. And I think having, you know, knowing that there's a network of support for you, whoever those people may be, and then having the humility to go lean on them, right? And say like, oof, I can't do this right now. Will you listen to me for an hour? Or, hey, can you just like give me a hug? That goes miles and miles for being able to overcome challenges. So yeah, long-winded answer to your question, but I think generally if you can go through challenges with others, It helps.
Mm-hmm.
When you're by yourself and experiencing a transition, and if you can't immediately go like find and build that network, that's where you find your true mettle. And I've failed in those moments. I've had moments of, transition, if you want to call it that, where I'm alone and I don't do well. After, I had that breakup, I left the Air Force Academy, joined the Marine Corps, and in so doing, like, left all my best friends from the Air Force behind, moved to Virginia by myself. I had just torn my ACL, so I wasn't starting training. I was living in an apartment by myself, getting drunk 3 or 4 nights a week because, like, what else am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And I was not somebody who was, like, really into that in my younger days, but I was alone. I was, I think, without a sense of meaning and certainly without a support system. And I failed. Like, my response was, let me just go internal and numb my pain rather than confront it and face it and overcome it. Getting out of that cycle involved a lot of, I think, talking with you. I remember having late night phone calls with you about like soul ties and overcoming deep heart wounds and things like that. So having a reflection helped, but I was still physically in that space alone.
Yeah.
So I think what helped me overcome that hardship was like finding it in myself to, find meaning in little tiny things. Like, hey, I'm going to go work out today, and that's going to add meaning and purpose to my life. I'm going to cook today, and that's going to add meaning and purpose to my life. And I think if you can string together small wins and small victories, you can take a really daunting task like living by yourself and changing careers at the same time and make it extremely manageable by piling up small victories,
How did you realize that? Because so many men, and I mean both men and women, but you and I encounter so many men who basically just get stuck in trying to numb. Even if they don't really know they're numbing, they're bored, they don't really have a meaning or a purpose, they don't really have a team, whether it's because they're in a different city than their team or because they just haven't made the effort or learned how to build that. So how did you not get stuck in that numbing cycle or that stay in distracted cycle? And then how can other people first realize they're in it and then start to identify some of those small victories? Because that's huge.
I think the things that we use to numb ourselves are almost entirely external things. It could be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be sex, it could be, any litany of like chemical inducing things. Our phones, video games, Netflix.
Yep.
None of those things provide lasting value. What does give me lasting peace and has in those deep, dark moments reminded me of my purpose in life has been to go somewhere where I am really small and can appreciate like how minuscule and tiny I am in the universe. And, I'm a person of faith. Like, my faith is important to me. I think even if I weren't, going to a place like that would remind me like, oh, the world is really big. My problems just aren't that big of a deal. Like, this is okay. There are billions of people out there right now making it. I can make it too. So I think that helps. But also for me as a person of faith, to be reminded that in spite of how small I am, God has a purpose for me and cares enough to like give me something to read, to learn about who he is, or people around me to model what that looks like. Even though I'm so tiny, somebody out there cares for me that way. That gives me a lot of meaning in dark moments. And this is maybe a weird one. I love just like tiny little examples of nature ground me. So like picking up a flower or a leaf, I'm going to sound like a hippie right now, but I think something to just like touch and feel and have a sensory response to something outside of yourself. That helps me a lot. And to like pick up a leaf that fell off a tree 5 months ago, but still has shape and form and texture, and then be reminded like, wow, if this little tiny thing can be so intricate and complex, and why am I worrying about these little tiny problems? There's a great verse of scripture that I'm going to butcher, where I think this is in Matthew, where Jesus says, like, look at the birds, look at the flowers. Like, God takes care of birds.
Yeah.
God gives, like, flowers water and soil.
Right.
And they're doing great. So why are you worried? Like, that's animals and freaking flowers. So chill out. Quit worrying about your problems. Long-winded answer again. I just think that being external, having things that take you out of this internal, inward-focused mindset is what can be the unlock to being able to find peace.
Oh, I love it. So you probably didn't even know this at the time, but you discovered on your own what the research shows about physical touch, especially something from nature. It hits, to kind of simplify the research, when we bring a leaf or a stick or something that was outside, we just bring it into our office. Even if we can't get outside ourselves to give ourselves a mental break, just touching something from nature gives our brain that reset button. And also, like you said, it reminds me and reminds all of our brains that, like, okay, it's not totally about me. There's something much bigger that I'm just a small piece of. And to have that tactile ability to connect to that truth, it can really shift the brain in massive ways.
Yeah, definitely.
So take us back, going back to this idea of transition, because you said 1 week you were running track in a high school track meet, and then a few weeks later, you're literally in a totally different world. So how did you adjust? How did you then, because I know your story well enough to know that you rose to the top pretty quickly. That wasn't your goal, but just by nature of who you are and the things that you did, that happened. So take us through that part of the story.
Yeah. When I started at the Air Force Academy, the first 6 weeks you do there are called basic cadet training. It's essentially indoctrinating you into, the ways of the Air Force, the ways of the Air Force Academy, sort of earning your keep, if you will, figuring out how to do the thing.
Yeah.
When I got there, it's in Colorado Springs, there was a massive wildfire. It was the biggest wildfire in the history of the state of Colorado at the time. It was in 2012. And it was burning literally on the campus, like on the base at the Air Force Academy. And we'd get up, at 4 a.m. and march to breakfast. And I remember, like, the first day I was there, marching to breakfast, looking out of the corner of my eye as these, 80-foot tall ponderosa pines exploded into flame, like out of the corner of my eye. And I'm like going to breakfast. So I'm like, okay, this is different. This is
not back home anymore.
Yeah. Well, I just want a bowl of cereal, man. What the heck?
Right.
I think that honestly, having rapid change just kind of forces you to adapt. A place like the Academy or joining the Marines, it's sink or swim, and people sink, and that's okay. I think, like, if you sink in that environment, it doesn't mean you're a bad person or you can't hack it. It just means, like, that's not the environment where you were best equipped to thrive in life. But I happen to thrive in it. Like, the structure of the military, the discipline, I'm someone who really values, like, a system of honor and integrity, even though I fail at it oftentimes. But I really value it, and that's the core part of the ethos, certainly at the Air Force Academy, also in the Marine Corps. So that just really clicked for me. And I was able to, I think, achieve a lot of things because I was in an environment where, I was equipped. I had the tools to succeed. I was surrounded by people who shared common values and celebrated, like, success that I was capable of achieving. By the time I got to my senior year at the Air Force Academy, I had gone from, like, being this, you're called a dually your freshman year, which is derived from the Greek term doulos, which means slave. So we could go deep on that. I don't want to, but it's probably not kosher. But yeah, so, like, you go from, the slave term to, by my senior year, I was the cadet in charge of, like, 4,200 people, which was an awesome, cool experience, and also, like, humbled me to no end. And absolutely, I think I allowed it in a lot of ways to just drive me into the dirt. I learned more in, 3 or 4 months as the cadet wing commander at the academy about failure, about my weaknesses, than I had learned in 18 years up to that point.
pause real fast.
Yeah.
Tell people who don't know what wing commander is, what exactly was that leadership responsibility?
So at any of the military academies in the U.S., you're going to have about 4,000 cadets or midshipmen at the Naval Academy. And these are your equivalent of like your college freshmen to seniors, 18 to 24, 26 years old, who have come to this university not only to get a college degree, but also to earn a commission as an officer in the military. So it is a military school. You're a member of active duty service. I got a W-2 from the United States Air Force from when I was 18 years old, right? So the cadet wing at the Air Force Academy is the name for the student body, if you will. But it's a militarized structure. A wing in the Air Force is like a unit of organization that, it's like a maneuver unit on the battlefield. A wing has groups have squadrons have flights have fighter planes. So like there's organization there that is sort of emulated in the student body at the Air Force Academy. And like in the big real Air Force, you have a structure of leadership that, takes on responsibility in those different roles. Now, it's not total responsibility. Like we call the Air Force Academy the zoo because people could like come and visit and look down and point and laugh at us. We're like the zoo animals. Yeah. But there were adults running the zoo, right? So there were commissioned officers and senior enlisted folks who were in the Air Force and had graduated who could kind of be the guardrails on this system. But we also called it a leadership laboratory because for me, as someone who was leading that 4,000 member team, I had a ton of autonomy, way more than I think, with the exception of two other like people in the United States at West Point and Naval Academy. That level of autonomy is not often given to a 22-year-old to like, hey, here's 4,000 people, don't screw it up. And I screwed it up a lot. And I got to make decisions that, affected their lives. And I was trying to drive the team in the right direction. I don't think I did that perfectly. I think I did a lot of things well and a lot of things poorly. But it was a great experience for me to practice leadership, to make mistakes. And I learned a ton about, how to lead well and how not to lead well. One thing I want to hone in on real quick is this was in fall of 2015. At the time, there was an app called Yik Yak. Do you remember Yik Yak?
Yeah, I forgot about Yik
Okay,
Yak.
yeah. I hate Yik Yak.
Yes.
What I learned is, I'm super susceptible to peer pressure. Yik Yak, for those who don't know, was essentially like anonymous, talking crap about people. You could go onto this website for your college campus and say like, hey, I don't like the food at the dining hall, and this person who works there stinks. This is their name. Screw them. And people can go on and like and upvote and comment. And I think when you're in a position of leadership, you have a spotlight shining on you. And when you do something that is controversial or people don't enjoy, they're going to shine that spotlight and then hurl insult at you. It's human nature. And I had never really had that before. And having anonymous, taking anonymous criticism like that wasn't necessarily grounded in truth. It was kind of put out there so people could get the endorphin hit of getting likes on their post on Yik Yak. That really, really hurt me, really deeply hurt me to see myself and my actions get criticized. I just wanted to help. I wanted to make people's lives better. I wanted to make people better leaders so that they could go improve the lives of the airmen, soldiers, sailors, Marines that they led down the road. Yeah. And having a mirror reflecting back to me you're not doing that perfectly. Here's exactly where you did it wrong. And I think you're a POS because of it. That really got underneath my skin. And I learned a lot about myself in that chapter about how important it is, I think, to have a North Star, a guiding light of, why are you doing things in life? Why are you making the decisions that you're making? And if it's not oriented with that purpose, and instead it's oriented with, I want to make people happy, or I want people to like me, you're going to drift away from that North Star quickly. and you're going to be a ship lost at sea. And I was that for a little while. Like, it really tore me apart emotionally, and it took, I think, some like good friends, back to transitions, like support system of human beings around me that I could go to and, sort of help me like rebuild confidence in my ability to lead before I went and did it for real in the Marine Corps. But yeah.
When you first faced that type of criticism, I know you well enough to know that I don't know anybody who has a bigger servant heart than you, and I've never seen a self-serving bone in your body. So I know when you had such pure motives as a leader, like you said, you were just wanting to help, and because you're human, you weren't going to do it perfectly. You weren't going to lead perfectly. There were going to be mistakes, and when they happened, that criticism comes at you. Like, what were some of the thoughts in your head of like, okay, well, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that? Like, we all have those instinctual reactions, but you decided to actually respond rather than react.
Eventually. I mean, I had moments like standing in the shower with a razor blade, and like I'm unafraid to admit that at this stage in my life, that I really allowed the enemy to just get to me. Fortunately, I was also surrounded by people who didn't discourage that. There was a big stigma about mental health in the military at the time, where like if you went and talked to somebody about, a mental health issue or like a thought of suicide, you were going to kind of disappear and never come back. And so I didn't talk to anybody about it, save a few like really trusted confidants. And rather than like, rushing me away for medical help, which I think oftentimes would have been appropriate, and probably would have been, the way the environment was there. And again, don't take this as medical advice, but what they did was put an arm around me, encourage me, and say like, hey, don't do that. Let's talk about why you're feeling this way. Why do you care what those people are saying? Why do you care what they think? It's okay to feel that way, but let's analyze it because it's probably not healthy. Look at yourself. I think having a support system around me of people who were willing to speak truth into my life rather than just validate me and say like, oh yeah, Mac, like maybe you should feel bad about that. Maybe you should reconsider that decision. People would like you more if you changed your mind. I had people around me who said, nope, do the right thing and screw what they say on Yik Yak. Screw what they say about you behind closed doors. Like, the people who care about you are in the room and believe in the direction you're going and what the decision you're making. Having those people around you in a hard moment in life, I think, can be the difference in a cycle of self-demise or a cycle of like rebuilding. And I was able to rebuild from that. Like, and I think having people around me to help was a big difference maker. But I also learned through that experience that as a leader, you just can't please everybody.
Yeah.
I could have like maybe read a book to learn that lesson, but I decided to do it the hard way. You can't please everyone. You will piss someone off with a decision you make, no matter how good or bad it is. Someone will be loud about it and angry. Theirs is the voice that will probably get elevated because it's controversial and fun. People like to listen to angry things. And you know what? If it's valid and you respect what they have to say, listen. If you respect them, listen, consider, and decide. If you don't respect them, if they like truly don't rate the oxygen or the time of day, don't listen. It's not worth it. And that helped me a lot as a leader. When I was an officer in the Marine Corps, I had to make decisions like that my Marines did not enjoy all the time. But I knew through trial and error and listening to my senior advisors and making decisions that were grounded in like truth and wisdom, yes, hiking up this hill will suck, and we're going to do it now. Let's go. I think being able to make those hard decisions and, focus on the objective rather than focusing on the response to the decision.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard, but that's how progress gets made in life. So, yeah, I learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to learn it the hard way because people can tell us, or you can read a book like you joked about, but until you're actually in the thick of it, The reality doesn't sink in.
Yeah.
And I love what you said about the friends that you reached out to. They didn't just empathize, they made you get better. Because a lot of times, especially right now where the mental health conversation that's out there on social media, a lot of it is just emphasizing, well, if you let somebody know that they're seen and they're heard and that they're understood, that's all they need. No, because like you said, they could have just said, yeah, I feel bad for you, so you just keep doing what you're doing. And no, that doesn't force us to get any better and add to our capacity to keep on serving. So your friends, they did empathize, and then they said, you're going to keep doing the direction you're going. You're going to keep serving people.
Yeah, or make appropriate changes.
Yeah.
And having people that I respected and who I could trust around me to make those, like, to advise me was huge. And by the way, I should add, they eventually got to, like, go to counseling, Mac. Go speak to a human being about why you have had that thought in your head and how to deal with it, because it'll come back. And if you're listening, it comes back. Like, so I did have people who were like iron sharpening iron to me and saying, like, you cannot defeat that thought in your head by yourself. Go and get help. Go and get professional help. And then come back and be yourself and do a good job and be authentic, and don't worry about what anybody else thinks if you don't respect their opinion. Yeah. So, yeah.
So you were able to continue serving, continue leading. You got better because of it. You learned you can't please everybody. And also you said you kept having to make hard decisions that were going to please some and not please others. But did you develop any sort of decision-making framework that you still use now?
Framework is probably not the right term for it, but I definitely have some principles that I try to abide by when making a decision. Some of which I got from the Air Force, some of which I got from the Marine Corps, some of which I've just learned in life in general. I think for starters, having a bias for action is, I think, really valuable. If you sit around and twiddle your thumbs, life will pass you by. If you, like we talked about earlier, take a step, go a direction. That's how you make progress. Like, you know, if you're in Robert Frost's poem and these two roads are converged and you can go left or right, just go. Pick one. Like, just go. It's a step forward, even if it's, 15 degrees offset from straight. You can turn back later. And so I think having a bias for action is a principle I try to live by. I think oftentimes you need to be willing to act on incomplete information. And I had to do this a lot in the Marine Corps. It's kind of part of what makes the Marine Corps special is the ability to be decisive without a complete sight picture. Like, once you have, we say once you have 70% of the solution, go. Like, be comfortable with 70%. That doesn't mean don't have high standards, don't set expectations high, or be rash, or make unwise choices. But it does mean if you want to outcycle other people and, get ahead in a competitive environment, which in my world was like warfare. But I think in, civilian sectors could be the office, relationships, like school. If you want to get ahead, you have to be willing to act on incomplete information. Like, if you don't know whether to go to college A or college B, like I talked about a minute ago, pick one, go. Like, don't wait for the perfect answer. Just go. And you know what? The life is long, hopefully, Lord willing, and it's big, and the world is big, and you sitting on your hands and failing to make a decision is probably going to impede you more than it's going to help you. So having a bias for action, being willing to act on incomplete information. I think another thing that helps me make decisions is knowing when to expect perfection and when to be comfortable with good enough. You've probably heard the phrase, like, don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good guiding principle. The Air Force was perfection. Like, the academy was perfection was the expectation. We would do room inspections where, like, on a Saturday morning at 6 a.m., you're standing in your room at the position of attention while an inspector comes through and finds that one spot and wipes it with a white glove and is like, there's dust here.
That drives me nuts just
you
even
now
think
fail.
About it.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Dude, we would literally go through, we would take duct tape and like pat every nook and cranny with duct tape to pick up the little flecks of dust. It was a fun time. Anyhow, that perfection was the expectation. And you know what? There's a time and a place for that. Because when you're in a jet going, the speed of sound, and you make a decision, like an imperfect decision there could kill you or someone else. And so there's a time and a place for that. What I learned from the Marine Corps is there's also a time and a place for good enough, go on to the next thing. And I think it's valuable to know the difference between those two things, to know when to expect perfection and 100% adherence, and when to look at somebody and say like, hey, good job, let's move on. Yeah. One story that calls to mind, I know we're close on time, so
bring it.
Shut up. One story that calls to mind, in the Marine Corps, the uniform order is very, and there's a lot of perfection in the Marine Corps, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of regulation around what you can wear in your uniform, right? In your standard combat uniform, you're supposed to wear coyote tan socks, coyote brown, specific color. And you can go find coyote brown socks like at the PX, the base store.
All right.
But they're lousy socks. And when you go to the field, like they're not made of wool, they're made of like polyester and cotton on your feet. Cotton kills. Like you cannot wear that. It doesn't wick moisture, it holds moisture. As someone who's had frostbite on my toes, I can tell you it's not fun to wear cotton socks. So what you can do is you can go buy these great socks. They don't sponsor me, but darn tough, Vermont. You could sponsor me anytime.
That's right.
They're wool socks, and wool wicks moisture. Wool's good for your feet. They're black. They're not coyote brown. So you're stuck in this crossroads of, do I obey the uniform order and expect my Marines to obey the uniform order by wearing coyote brown socks? Or do I instead bias towards, hey, I don't want you to get injured. I want you to be combat effective on the battlefield. And I'm willing to like say, yes, wear those black socks. I'm cool with it. I don't care. Move on. There's a time and a place for both. And I think there's a time, I learned in the Marine Corps, like there's a time and a place when it's okay to wear black socks. And it's okay to tell your Marines like, Doc, I don't care about what color your socks are. I care about you killing the enemy. And I think, so just having perspective helps you understand when those minutiae are important. And oftentimes they're super important. And learning how to have that discipline is valuable. But you also need to know when to pull the throttle back on those things and focus your attention elsewhere.
When to be flexible is another way to say it.
Exactly. Yeah.
How do you know when you're making a decision based on, okay, I'm demanding perfection here because it's needed versus I'm demanding perfection because I'm afraid? Because I think fear can cause us to get perfectionistic.
Yeah, that's so good, Trey. Man, I think the best answer I can give you there is, if you're demanding it for your own ego, then it's probably wrong. But if you're demanding it for an external need or for someone else's betterment or improvement, it's probably right. Not a perfect solution. But if I'm telling you, like, no, you will wear these socks because I want to feel powerful, and dang it, you're going to wear the socks that I tell you to wear. That's me feeding my ego. Is it right? Well, sure it is, according to the uniform order. Like, I am correct, but I'm not right. On the other hand, hey, I want you to wear these coyote brown socks right now because you need to understand, like, there's a purpose behind the discipline that I'm teaching you and the discipline that comes in this uniform order. And the discipline that it teaches is going to make you more combat effective when we go downrange, and you need to be disciplined about how much water you consume, or you need to be disciplined about how you camouflage your face and your hands and your skin. And if you can't practice discipline with wearing the right color socks when we're, back home and you're staying in your barracks room, then how can I entrust you with making more disciplined decisions in war? That's an outward focused why. So I think if you're demanding perfection for a rational, externally focused purpose, you're probably more likely to be right. But if it's to feed your ego, to give yourself power, or, to feel like you're doing a good job, you're probably wrong.
So that's leadership genius. But then the other thing you just said, and I don't even know if you realize this is a principle you were teaching while saying it, the ability and the willingness to communicate to the person you're leading why you're asking them to do something. Because you can just tell them this is how it's going to be, and it still could be the right thing for them. It still could be for their benefit, but you took the time to articulate this is why.
Yeah.
And that showed you cared enough about them.
We could talk about this for hours, but I'll tell 2 quick stories.
Yeah.
So there's a great book by Simon Sinek called Start With Why. And he wrote that book when he was embedded with a unit in Afghanistan where the purpose was explicit. Everyone from like the very bottom of the chain of command to the top had the right to ask, why are we doing this? In the Marine Corps, we talked a lot and taught a lot about this idea of commander's intent. And if you're one of my Marines and I'm your commander, I can't sit there and micromanage everything you do with your hands and your feet and your eyes and whatever else and your weapon system. I need you to just take my intent and the purpose I give you and go execute it while I can focus on something else. That why, and giving you that why, helps you understand why you're doing your job and may help you do it a better way than what I prescribe to you. Like if I tell you, hey, Trey, I want you to get from here to downtown Chattanooga, and I want you to take this exact route, right? You could say, okay, well, why do you want me to get there? And if my answer is because the faster you get there, the sooner you can save this person's life, you're probably inclined to say either like, hey, got it, cool, I'll go fast. Or funny, because I actually think there's a faster way I can get there. I understand your intent is for me to go fast. Thank you for telling me why. I will go fast and execute on your intent. But if the purpose I give you is like, I want you to enjoy this scenic route and take your time. It's the why, giving that why and intent and purpose will always make you more effective. You're not always going to be able to do it. There will be times when it's like, Trey, just do what I said. I need you to go. I don't have time. Trust me. And if you don't have trust with the person you're leading, that's really hard. But over time, by providing purpose, by providing clear intent and giving you the why, we can develop that trust so that when the time comes and I say, hey, Trey, go from point A to point B, and you want to ask why, and I say, sorry, well, I need you to go, you can say Roger and just trust. So that's one thing. The other is I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and they've learned the question why.
Probably their first words, or at least close to them.
Yeah, I think their first words were like, mama and poo-poo. So,
which is maybe more annoying than why. You know?
It is for my wife. Yeah, it's harder to say what they call me. Anyhow, they love to ask why, and they're kids. Like they want to understand the world. They want to learn. And what I tell my children is, you can always ask why, always. But I also expect you to obey. And those two things need to be coupled. If I say, hey, honey, go to your room, put your pajamas on, or like, hey, I need you to go put your socks and shoes on, it's okay to say, why, Papa? And I'll say, because we're going to the park, and we can't go until you put your socks and shoes on. Oh, man, she's going to light up like a candle. She's going to be so excited to go put her socks and shoes on. But if I told her that, and her answer was, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm not going to obey. Oh, okay, I guess we're not going to the park anymore, and you don't get to enjoy that. So I think it's important as a leader, and man, parenting will like humble you as a leader. Let me tell you right now, I've learned more about leadership as a parent than I ever learned in the Marine Corps. Anyhow, I think as a leader, your job is to give the why. Like it's not an option. Purpose needs to be baked into an order, a command, an ask, an email, whatever. It needs to be present. If it's not, and somebody asks, like they just want to understand. In all likelihood, they're trying to do what you ask them more effectively. And they're going to be more effective if you deliver that purpose, if you deliver that why. And this is what Simon Sinek talks about in his book, so I would encourage the listener to go and read it. But it's the same way in parenting, giving purpose, giving why, and then pairing that with also I need you to like trust me and go obey what I'm asking you to do. I promise life will be better if you obey, because I've experienced this and I've done this and I've been there. That's how progress is made. So, yeah, the why is massive. The why is huge.
Man, that's good. There's so many gems we could even riff on even more. So
Yeah.
let's, first of all, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you want to cover, knowing that we're going to talk again because there are so many other topics that we didn't get to hit,
Yeah.
but we'll
we
do
can
it
talk for
again.
hours.
Anything that I haven't asked you want to make sure we cover?
Maybe to just tie a bow on the idea of transitions. When people are going through transitions in life, everything's a transition. You transition when you get out of the bed in the morning. I would just like to put a bow on it. Make a decision and incorporate your support network. I think that's the way to successfully transition from A to B. A pretty decent framework you can apply to most like transition points or decisions in life. That's really the only thing I want to put a ribbon on. But thanks for having me on, man. I'm glad we got to chat.
Hey, thanks so much for being here today. Before you go, would you hit that subscribe button so that future episodes come right to you? Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.